Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are on lesson 9. We purposely skipped lesson 8. So we're on lesson 9, which is on page 61. And we're going to continue adding and subtracting fractions. But before we start, we're going to actually write our steps again. And I know we've written them, but we're going to continue to write them a couple of times. So I'm using this blank page. I will take a few shortcuts, but I'm going to add and subtract fractions. So what are our steps? Well, our first step is, remember, we're going to set up our problem vertically. And we already have these steps written on page 46, but we're going to keep writing them until we get them down. Step 2 is we must have a common denominator. That is extremely important. It is a must. So we must have a common denominator. Remember, we use something called the least common multiple for that. Our next step is we are then ready to add or subtract whatever the question tells us. And when we add or subtract, we always do fractions first. We always do fractions first, just like you would do the ones place first. We always do fractions first, and eventually we might come across problems where we might need to borrow if needed. Okay, step 4 is we are going to fix improper fractions. So those greater than 1 fractions, we're going to fix. So we're going to fix what we call greater than 1 fractions, or sometimes we call them improper fractions. And step 5, we are going to simplify. We use our greatest common factor for. So these are the steps that we need to know, and we're going to be using these for months. So we want to get really good at these 5 steps. Okay, so I'm going to use those next to me to help me. So I'm on page 61 again. And remember, we're not going to use their style. So we're going to leave our problem or our equation, but we're not going to use that method. So my equation says I have 3/10 plus 1/3. And notice I'm kind of writing small. So if that's too hard for you, you can always use lined paper and a separate piece of paper. Okay, when I see 3 and 10, I did step 1. I'm on step 2. Those are not common denominators. They're different. So I cannot proceed until I have common denominators. So I'm going to use some space up here. Here are my denominators, and I need to find what we call the least common multiple. So I always start with my smallest, and I list my multiplication facts out. So I have 3 times 1, 3 times 2, thank you, 3 times 3, 3 times 4, and I'm noticing that none of these will be multiples of 10 yet. 3 times 5, 3 times 6, 3 times 7, 3 times 8, 3 times 9, and 3 times 10. And finally, I see something that is a multiple of 10, because I know my multiples of 10 are 10, 20, 30. So I finally saw something that would work, and it's 30. So that's going to be my common denominator. Now, some people think they could have done a shortcut and they could have just multiplied these. That is a bad idea and a terrible habit, and you'll see why farther down on a different problem. So I'm not going to multiply those. I'm going to do it right and find the least common multiple. So how did my 10 become a 30? Well, it was multiplied by 3. So I'm going to do the same thing here. So 3 times 3 is 9. So 3/10 is equivalent to 9/30. How did this 3 become a 30? It was multiplied by 10. So I'm going to multiply this one by 10, which means it's 1. And remember, that's allowed mathematically, because if I multiply something by 3 over 3, it's the same as multiplying it by 1. So I'm not changing the value. I'm just changing what it looks like. Okay, so now they have the same denominator, and I can go on to step 3, which is add or subtract fractions first. So now I can go on to step 3, which is add or subtract fractions first, and I get for that 9 plus 1 is 10, and 30 stays the same. So remember, my denominators are not going to change. So my denominators stay the same. Okay, so those will not be changing. Why did I say 10? Did I make a mistake? I made a mistake here, friends. That's why that didn't make sense. 1 times 10 is 10. Wow, sorry about that. 9 plus 10 is 19, and my denominator stays 30. I knew something didn't look right. So my answer is 19/30ths. Now my final step says fix it if it's greater than 1. This is not greater than 1. And to simplify. I know there's not a GCF that's other than 1. I know there's no number that fits into both of these other than 1. And that's because I know my times tables really well. Okay, so let's go on to our next one. Our equation or our problem is right there, and we're going to solve it our way. So we're going to set up 3/5 subtract 3/8. Okay, step 1. Step 2 is I need to find common denominators for 5 and 8. So I'm going to come up here where I maybe have some room. So 5 and 8. So I always start with my smallest one, and I list out my times tables. 5 times 1 is 5. That doesn't work. 5 times 2 is 10. Nope. 5 times 3, no. 5 times 4 is 20. 5 times 5 is 25. 30, 35, 40. Okay, I know 40 is the first number that is also a multiple of 8. I could have listed them out for 8, but I already know that because it's 8 times 1, 8 times 2, 8 times 3, 8 times 4, and 8 times 5. So if I know it, I don't really list it out again. So I know 40 is going to be my least common multiple or my common denominator. So I'm going to set up my problem with 40. And now I'm going to do my new numerators. So what happened to the 5 to turn it into a 40? It was multiplied by 8. So I'm going to multiply that by 8. And I get 3 times 8 is 24. What happened to 8 to multiply it by 40 is times 5. So I'm going to multiply that, and I get 15. And again, that works because multiplying something by 8 over 8 is the same as multiplying it by 1. Okay, so now I have 24. Take away 15 is 9. And my denominator stays the same. And again, I know my factors really well. So the greatest common factor is 1. So I know I cannot simplify that. And I know I didn't do step 4 because it's not a greater than 1 fraction. Okay, on to number 3. It's set up this way. We're not going to use that. So we're going to do it our method. 1/4 and 2/9. So I'm going to add those. Okay, they don't really leave me space to work here, but I need to find the common denominator for step 2 for 4 and 9. So I might come over here and use this space. So for 4 and 9. So I'm going to list my smaller ones out. So 4 times 1 is 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. None of those work for 9 yet. 24, 28, 32, 36 is the first one that works because 9 times 1, 9 times 2, 9 times 3, 9 times 4. So again, you might be thinking I could have multiplied those, but that's a bad habit. We're not going to create those bad habits. So we're going to come over here, and I know that 36 is my least common multiple. So let's set up our problem with the 36. And how did 4 turn into 36? Well, 4 times 9 is 36, so 1 times 9 is 9. How did 9 turn into 36? times 4. So 2 times 4 is 8. So now my problem says 9 plus 8 is 1736. And that is not greater than 1, so I don't need to do step 4. And I can't simplify it, so I'm not going to do step 5. So I am done. Okay, I'm going to skip this one for you to do. This is the one that I'd like you to do on your own after the video. And I'm going to go down to number 5. Okay, so number 5 is, luckily I have a little bit more room finally, 2 6 plus 3 tenths. Okay, we're going to see on number 5 why I've been telling you we have to find the LCM for step 2. So if 6 and 10 are my denominators, I'm going to think of my multiples for 6. So 6 times 1 is 6, 6 times 2 is 12, 6 times 3 is 18, 6 times 4 is 24, 6 times 5 is 30. And it happened. I found it. Because I know 30 is also a multiple of 10. So 30 worked. So if I had multiplied them, I would have got 60, which is way too big. So I don't want to get a larger one than I need. So it is 30 is the least common multiple. So that is going to be my new denominator. So 6 times 5 equals 30, which means 2 times 5 is 10. 10 times 3 is 30, so 3 times 3 is 9. So I am getting 19 thirtieths. And step 4 does not need to be done because it's a less than 1 fraction because the numerator is smaller than the denominator. And I cannot simplify this. So I know I don't need to do that step. Okay, the last one I'm going to do with you is 7/8 take away 2 6. Okay, so step 1 is vertical. Step 2, let's make our common denominator. So I have 8 and 6. So I'm always going to start with the smaller one. 6 times 1, 6 times 2, 6 times 3, 6 times 4. I'm going to stop because I know 24 is also a multiple of 8 because 8 times 3 is 24. So I found it. And again, it's not multiplying those. It's finding the least common one. So I have 8 times 3 is 24, and 7 times 3 is 21. 6 times 4 is 24, and 2 times 4 is 8. So my equation is 21 take away 8 is, what would that be? 13 24ths. And that is not greater than 1, and it cannot be simplified. So that is my final answer. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you still have to go back and try number 4 on your own. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.